Welcome to Food Friends, a podcast inspiring home cooks to try new dishes in the kitchen by sharing trusted recipes, tips, and friendship. Hi, I'm Sonia.
And I'm Carrie. We met in Los Angeles over 15 years ago as personal chefs and haven't stopped talking about food since. We're so glad you're here. Thanks for being our food friend.
If you enjoyed our podcast, please subscribe, leave us a review, and share this episode with friends. We love hearing from you, so follow us on Instagram or drop us a line at foodfriendspodcast.com.
Yes, we'd love to hear from you and your food friends. Happy cooking and eating. Hi, Sonia.
Hi, Carrie.
Sonia, I'm dying to know, what are you making for Passover this year?
Carrie, Passover, as I've said many, many times, I think is the hardest holiday to host for of the year. If you are kind of a traditional Passover observer, you have to make a lot of different components, and there's a lot of traditional dishes, and there's a lot of restrictions. And obviously, every person who celebrates Passover celebrates it maybe a little differently. So I just want to acknowledge all that before we launch into it, which you know because you've helped cater many Passover dinners.
I've catered many Passover dinners, but it's also spring, and so there's so many opportunities to really lean into all the seasonal veggies that are showing up at the markets. And as you pointed out to me, Easter and Passover are in the same week this year, and they're both very early.
Yeah, I think whether you're hosting or you're going to someone else's spring celebration, whether it's Passover, Easter, or just it's warmer out, it's lighter out, it feels more festive out. I do think this is the kind of kickoff to a new hosting season. There's the winter hosting season, then there's this. So I am usually kind of a traditionalist about Passover. I typically make kind of the same things because I feel like you get that once a year chance and you get attached to certain dishes. So I'll link our past episodes where we've talked about menus and some of my more traditional menus. But I am also like, okay, maybe this is the year I mix it up a little bit more. And one of the things that has become a tradition for me is to not do a standard fish course. Like, okay, so in Passover, a lot of people serve gefilte fish. Gefilte fish is not everyone's favorite food.
Especially when you invite your non-Jewish friends to Passover. That's not something I grew up eating. And so I usually pass on that one.
I happen to love gefilte fish, but I grew up on it, but I don't serve it to my guests typically. I eat it on the other days of Passover. So sometimes I do a smoked fish platter, but one thing that I've been doing since I've met you and since you've been to my Passover is I love to do a sashimi style first course. And this year I'm thinking about a tuna crudo. And it was inspired because I was actually at a friend's house for dinner who had a Himalayan salt block and made a crudo on it and had the salt block in the freezer and then served the crudo on this salt block that was frozen. And it was so ice cold and refreshing. And it had like a citrusy element and an herby element. And it was such an unexpected appetizer that I was like, ooh, this is so good for hosting because it requires no cooking. It's actually quite easy to make. I don't have a Himalayan salt block, so I'm not going to do that. But I was like, ooh, I could serve it on a sheet pan with ice or like a casserole dish with ice and then put a plate on top of that and have it be very ice cold.
Yeah.
Wouldn't that
love
be
that
nice?
idea. Yeah.
Yeah. So this is the recipe I'm going to link is for a Sicilian tuna crudo recipe. And crudo just means raw. So this will just be thinly sliced sashimi grade tuna, which, you know, go to your fishmonger. Oftentimes Asian markets have it as well if you're interested in doing something like this. And then it's lemon zest, olive oil, pepper flake, pistachios that are crushed, and fresh herbs like basil. I might actually do mint or mint and cilantro, which is something you and I've done in the past.
Yeah.
This to me feels like a great refreshing first course on a meal that's going to have many courses because the next course you have to do matzo ball soup. I'm sorry. I just have to.
You do. I agree. I did not grow up eating matzo ball soup at all, but this is one of my favorite Jewish holidays because of the matzo ball soup.
And that's why I feel like I have to serve it. People come to my table, want it. I'm going to do one thing differently. I always make the same traditional matzo ball soup. We'll link that recipe too. But this year I want to do like a fun sauce to go with it. And I found this recipe for dill pistou. Pistou is just a French herb sauce, and I make pea stews with soups
It's a green
often, actually.
sauce,
It's
right? Just
basically
a green
green size.
sauce. Yeah.
I think matzo ball soup is so good with fresh dill, but I love the idea of it's basically olive oil, little garlic, some lemon and dill, and it just makes it one fun hosting element that I could make probably a couple days in advance and also make a big batch of and have throughout the week.
Yeah, and also could add a tiny bit if you're serving bowls of soup. I'm thinking about because I've catered so many
Yeah.
Passovers, you could add a tiny bit to each bowl, and then you could also have little bowls on the table or the
Leave it
Passover.
out.
Yeah, or leave it out. The kids, they want to leave it out. It adds that bright green element to your soup, which is such a nice thing to do when you've had this long cooking soup with a matzo ball in it.
Yeah, you've been sitting at the table for a while doing the rituals of the holiday, so it sort of brightens it up. For the main course, I really like to do lamb on Passover. I don't do it every year. Sometimes I do short ribs. But this year, I want to go back to lamb. And there's this recipe for slow cooked lamb with white wine and potatoes by Alison Roman. And what I love with this in particular for Passover is that it's kind of a one pot meal. The lamb and the
Really?
potato. Well, the lamb and the potatoes cook together, so then you don't have to make a whole separate starch because it's all
Right.
connected, at least for your meat eaters. I'm going to get into the vegetarian option later. Also, this is the kind of thing you could make ahead and easily rewarm, even with potatoes. You can reheat this whole dish. It will taste better the next day. And I love to get ahead, especially with hosting multi course meals. So I would likely make this a day or two ahead of time. You can either do bone in or boneless, a shoulder or a leg of lamb, salt it. You pick a dry white wine, pick a couple pounds of waxy potatoes, 2 heads of garlic, a lemon, and a bunch of oregano, marjoram, or thyme. And I think that just the simplicity of that, a bottle of wine, some aromatics, I bet that dill piece stew would
I
be
was
good
going
on
to
this
say the
too.
same thing. That's akin to a gremolata. When you have a long cooked meat, adding something fresh at the end really brightens it up. Making a braise, like a braised lamb, is so forgiving. It's a succulent meat. It really doesn't dry out.
That's such a good point. I'm so glad you brought that up because I do think people feel intimidated by lamb, but I think it's actually easier than some other cuts of red meat. And it does typically not dry out. Like all you need to do is cook low and slow. So if you follow the recipe and you really give it the time in the oven and you poke it and make sure it's tender, that's all you need to know to cook a lamb well. And
Yeah.
it requires so little to be special.
Yeah, I mean, I confess I would choose lamb over brisket. I find that
Yeah.
brisket can be really finicky. There have been many times when my client and I have made brisket and it comes out tough
Yeah.
and it's kind of unpredictable.
That's such a good point. I'm so glad you brought that up because I do think brisket is a go to. So maybe this is a year to try lamb if you've been curious about it before. Though I have to say, I know that I'm going to have vegetarians at my table and I never want them to feel like an afterthought. So I always like to have a really fun vegetarian side. The one I'm thinking about for this year is Sephardic leek patties, which are fritters that are made with potato and leek. They're not terribly complicated, but they are a traditional Passover food and they're a little bit different than a latke. They're a little sturdier, heftier. Some people make them with matzah meal, which is just like
Oh, wow.
crumbled matzah.
Yeah.
It's really a fritter. I do think you can make these ahead of time as well. You could freeze them in a single layer like a week ahead of time and then just pop them in your oven while people are eating the soup course and reheat them and they'll turn real crispy and hot while you're doing that. So again, I'm thinking about my menu in terms of like what on earth can I make ahead? But this is really just leeks, potato, onion, some matzo meal, some eggs, and some frying oil, and you've got a fritter.
I mean, that sounds delicious. Separate from Passover, that sounds like such a great things to stick in the freezer and to have when you need a quick meal.
Totally. And if you didn't want to use matzo meal, if you're this isn't for
You can use
Passover, you could totally use
breadcrumbs.
breadcrumbs.
Yeah.
Exactly. And then for a side vegetable, you have to have a vegetable. I'm doing roasted fennel, onion, and orange. I love a roasted fennel this time of year. It feels very springy. So something really simple.
Do you roast the orange with the fennel or do you add the orange at the end?
So you could do either. That's a great question. This recipe is from Molly Stevens on Food 52, and she does include the orange in the roasting process.
Oh, wow. So it gets kind of jammy a little bit, like it caramelizes. How
Yes, it does.
delicious.
So good with fennel. And again, so make ahead friendly.
So, Sonia, I know that you're making amazing desserts for Passover. So please share.
And again, I want to reiterate this is not like a normal dinner party. It's the biggest meal of the year, besides maybe Thanksgiving for me personally. So I go all out. I like to have multiple desserts. I think it's festive. I'm going to be making something I started making last year again, which is a very simple almond tort by Retro Lilies, this food developer, Haya Rappaport. It's an incredible incredible almond dessert. It's totally flourless, totally grain-free, completely made with almonds. And I love to serve that with a strawberry rhubarb compote or some kind of fruity element. But on its own, it's perfection. It's another thing you can make a day or two in advance. But what I really want to tell you about is something else I'm excited about for Passover this year, which is a grain-free carrot cake from
Ooh.
Smitten Kitchen. Yes.
Carrot cake is also super traditional for Easter and just a spring dessert in its own right.
I think in that there's so many blended families and there's so many different groups that might gather at a table that I thought carrot cake was, to your point, exactly
Yes.
right. Even for Passover, because it's like a nod to Easter as well. And this one, again, has zero grains. Passover, we don't eat grains except for matzah. And this has no matzah in it. It's made with almond flour and shredded coconut and dates, brown sugar, grated carrots, a bunch of spices, but no weird ingredients, no weird substitutes, just whole ingredients. And it even comes with a frosting recipe. And she gives you instructions for dairy or non-dairy, because a
Oh,
lot of
wow.
people like to keep their desserts non-dairy at Passover if they're serving meat. So I just love everything about this recipe. I think having a grain-free dessert is just a good thing to have around in
Everybody needs
general.
one. Everyone needs a cake that is grain free. And it doesn't have to be like, oh, it's missing gluten. What I love about a carrot cake, I was waiting for you to say coconut. I love the richness of a carrot cake. Are there nuts in there too, like a walnut or a pecan or something?
Yeah, and I think it's optional, but I do think walnuts and carrot cake are really kind of
Yeah.
essential.
Yeah, I
But I
love
think your
that.
coconut is too, and I love the recipes that include it. And Smin Kitchen just has such reliable recipes
Yes.
that anything she posts I know is going to work and taste really good. The last thing I do, but I do it over the course of many days, there's this recipe for grain-free salted chocolate chip pecan blondies that I
Oh,
love.
wow.
I love a blondie. I think it's almost to me like a brookie, like it's almost chocolate chip cookie slash brownie vibes.
Yeah, your first two desserts, they're a little fancier. And I'm always thinking about Passover from working with the family I worked with, which was a mix of adults and kids. And at our Passover, there were always lots of handheld things like chocolate covered marshmallows or some kind of grain free cookie or meringues or coconut macaroons. And the kids were always taking those little handheld treats. I think a blondie really fits that profile of, you sort of have a pile of them or a pan of them and people can come along and kids can grab them and then go outside and play.
Such a good point. And I often do things like matzo toffee, which is kind of a traditional thing, but I want to do something different. And another thing that's really nice about this recipe is actually it's made with coconut sugar and some ingredients that are kind of less processed. So it's very dietary restriction friendly. If this isn't for Passover, this might be interesting to you at any time of year because it's made with pecans, coconut sugar, maple syrup, eggs, coconut flour. That's the flour instead of a
Oh,
nut, which is sort of
wow.
interesting.
Which would be
And then
rich, really rich.
really rich and
Yeah.
chocolate chips. And the reason I love this recipe is it reminds me of this childhood treat. I used to have this teacher who would make something called ooey gooey chocolate squares. And it was just such a memorable kind of blondie with ooey gooiness. And it had coconut, it had chocolate, it had butter or oil. I don't even know what the ingredients were. But it was so much like this, but this feels like a slightly more adult version, but that would appeal to kids.
And it's nice to have those all those options.
And you can send dessert home with people, which I think is always nice at the end of a dinner
Yeah,
party.
absolutely.
So, Carrie, what is your first menu for spring hosting?
Well, I'm thinking about a menu where I can invite another family over and just have a pretty casual dinner like outside on our back patio. In Los Angeles, it's already warm enough for us to entertain outside. I think it's probably not in Portland in this time of year, is it?
We've had an unusually warm winter and spring, but it's not quite LA entertaining weather.
Fair enough, fair enough. Well, one of my favorite vegetables to work with in the spring is spinach and also artichokes. And I also really love a spinach and artichoke dip. What I love about a spinach and artichoke dip is it's really like the trifecta of creaminess. It's mayonnaise, it's cream cheese, it's sour cream. You mix in a can of artichoke hearts, you mix in some fresh garlic, some frozen spinach that you've defrosted and squeezed all of the water out, and then some Parmesan cheese. And that's really about it. And you just stir it together in a bowl and put it in whatever Pyrex or baking dish that you have. And I'm always surprised and then somehow never surprised at how quickly spinach and artichoke dip goes. People are just always drawn to it. So
Who doesn't love an ooey gooey spinach artichoke dip?
yeah, you can serve it with baguette or with chips. You can add some raw veggies on the side.
You know, Carrie, you're making me realize that actually this would be a perfect Passover recipe for not the night you're hosting, but for other other days of Passover, and you could serve it with matzah. And if you toasted your matzah with butter, if you got it real crispy, that would be such a fun midweek night dish to have.
That sounds outrageous. And I think I could make a meal out of that. So, after starting with the spinach and artichoke dip, I found this really great recipe for a one skillet steak and spring veggie with spicy mustard sauce. And I think mustard is kind of one of those traditional flavors in the spring. What I love about this recipe is that you cook it all in a cast iron skillet. I love to serve anything in a cast iron skillet. It really calls for you to get like one big steak, either a flank steak or a New York strip. But if you had more people, you could just add another steak to your pan. You sear off your steak and then you let it rest. And in the same pan, you cook your vegetables. You saute your vegetables with a little bit of extra olive oil and a little bit of garlic. It's really not fancy at all. And then you put together this really simple sherry vinegar, Dijon mustard, a little bit of garlic, a little bit of honey. You can add a little bit of cayenne pepper if you want. And, they're calling for a bag of frozen peas and one bunch of asparagus. But if you've been to the farmer's market that week, you can certainly use snap peas if you have them or pea tendrils. It's really just a saute of veggies. Cut the steak, lay it over the vegetables in the black cast iron skillet. It's like a black skillet, green veggies, steak on top. You can put your sauce on top or serve it on the side, depending on who's sitting at your table. It's really an easy thing for entertaining. And I think steak feels special.
I think it feels really special. We did an episode long ago on steak night at home, but that felt very cozy, cooler months. It's so nice to hear of a spring version of a steak night. And it's so smart. You cook your steak, which really takes minutes, take it out, and in that resting time, because you need to let it rest for 10 or 15 minutes, of course, you can do like a 5-minute saute. And if you've cut and prepped your vegetables ahead of time, you're just sort of throwing this all together at the last minute.
Yeah, and I love that they call for you to use a bag of frozen peas because peas, the minute that they're picked, their sugars start to turn to starch. Any pea that you buy at the farmer's market is actually going to be less sweet than the ones that are in the freezer aisle. And so I think there's something so nice about relying on that, especially when you're doing a dinner party. And I'm thinking about a couple of really fun desserts, and I'm kind of trying to decide between which one I want. One of the things that we have talked about many times in the spring is rhubarb. Strawberry rhubarb is a really traditional combination in the spring. So there's a strawberry rhubarb compote with ginger and lime that made me think of you and also made me think about how I have a lime tree. And so if I were to find strawberries and rhubarb at the farmer's market that week, I would make this compote and I would serve it over your rice pudding, which I made recently and I fell in love with.
Oh, I'm so happy to hear that. And that was the first time you've ever made rice pudding?
Yeah, I did not grow up eating rice pudding. And
Right.
I don't know that I ever had it really before. It's actually so simple and so easy. And my son Mac, who's 10, he's like, "Wait, what is this? This is so good." Our family really loved it. And so I think adding some kind of beautiful seasonal compote on top of it makes it feel definitely a lot more special for a dinner party.
I am so touched to hear this. I love rice pudding, but I love that you're taking it and thinking about it as a dinner party element, because often we think of rice pudding as just a comfort food within your own family. But I do think when you have a bright fruity topping to it, it becomes a nice dessert for entertaining.
Yeah, absolutely. So I also found this recipe for malted strawberry cream puffs. When I clicked on it, I was really intrigued. So I love a cream puff. That was one of the first baking recipes I learned how to make back when I was in high school. And I will say, I think cream puffs are one of the easiest things to make if you really just follow the directions and pipe them out onto your baking sheet and put them in the oven. And you can always make them the day ahead and crisp them up the next day. And then you're just filling them with whipped cream and strawberries. But the twist on this one is that when you whip your cream, you add malted milk powder, which you could, of course, add or not add. But I think this sounds so interesting to have that unexpected element of malted milk powder. I'm really intrigued by it.
Sounds really good. I love a malty flavor, and it's actually not that hard to find that ingredient, or you can order it online. I've definitely used it here and there. And then you have it for also milkshakes in the summer, which could be fun. But I love any version of a strawberry and cream dessert, a strawberry shortcake, just strawberries and cream, strawberries and puff pastries. So I love the idea of a little cream puff with this. That's a very elegant dessert. dessert.
Yeah, it's elegant, but it's also easy to do and it's
Yeah.
make ahead. I mean, you can whip your cream ahead, you can slice your strawberries ahead, and then you can assemble it right as you're getting ready to serve it, or you can have your guests assemble their own dish.
That's so sweet. That's such a good idea.
Well, Sonia, what's your next menu that you're thinking about making this spring?
Okay, after all the Passover entertaining, I don't want to do another 10-course meal. So if
That
I'm going to
sounds
be
fair.
right, but I'm likely going to be hosting more than once this spring. I mean, it's part of our lives. Both of you and I love to host. I know my brother and my nieces are going to come at some point. So I know I'm going to be making meals throughout the season. I'm thinking of something that really highlights the freshness, the green, the vibrancy of spring. So my menu is for a beautiful salad followed by a great salmon dish with an herby rice and a strawberry themed dessert.
Oh, wow.
Specific. I mean, I just feel like all those things like greens,
Yeah.
asparagus, strawberry, those are all spring to me. And there's what I start to crave in April and May. So there's this delightful salad called Oma's Green Mountain Salad, which just has
By the
all
way,
these
well named. Well, I'm already
really,
intrigued. Yeah.
right?
What's in Oma's Green Mountain Salad?
Little gem lettuce, multi-colored carrots specifically that you peel into ribbons, baby turnips, which I think is lovely. And I think take every salad recipe with a grain of
Make it
salt
your
if you don't
own.
like make
Yeah.
it your own. So this
Yeah.
is just what this says. I would probably modify it too. Celery heart with the leaves, it says. French breakfast radishes, a cup of cherry tomatoes, avocados, and freshly chopped dill and black pepper, all in a buttermilk dressing that this recipe developer makes with ramps. But now
Oh,
ramps,
wow. This is like a recipe you could have written. I feel like every bit of this, there's dill, there's carrots, there's turnips, there's buttermilk, and ramps, which we don't, it's hard to get for us in Los
it's hard
Angeles,
to
but
get
they're
ramps.
everywhere for you.
They're not as everywhere as New England, but we do get them here for just a couple weeks. Now, the recipe says if you don't have ramps, you could use scallions or chives, and I probably would do that because you don't always know when you're going to get ramps, so I
Right.
wouldn't count on them. But it says specifically like the bulbs of the scallion, so the white part, because you want that oniony flavor.
Right.
And otherwise, it's a kind of typical buttermilk ranch, which I just love a buttermilk ranch. And I think that sort of creamy dressing with a very veggie heavy salad is a nice contrast. I might throw some snap peas in here. Might throw some blanched asparagus in here. Maybe I do turnips, maybe not. So I feel like it's really just about a beautiful, colorful salad with a creamy dressing. And then that would be to start. And then for the main, I'd want to do just two main dishes, which is a beautiful, slow cooked salmon with citrus and herbs. This recipe is a very well known Alison Roman recipe because it's having you cook your salmon at 300 degrees Fahrenheit,
Oh, wow.
which is actually different how I usually normally cook it at 425
I
pretty
like the
quickly.
crispy edges. Yeah, but this maybe does something different.
So I've made it before and it does do something different. I like it especially for entertaining because it gives you a little bit more leeway and it's a little bit more forgiving. So
Yeah.
you could pop it in the oven when your guests sit down to have the salad course, and then 20 to 25 minutes later, this will be ready. Or you could do it a little before the salad course, depending on how long you like to linger at the table. And then it's a lot of fresh lemon and oranges. And she says blood orange or mandarin or regular orange, thyme, which I love, or rosemary or oregano or marjoram.
Are all the
And then
citrus cooking on top of the piece of salmon, or are you putting them on at the end?
so you're basically using a casserole dish. You're putting your seasoned salmon, then you're layering it covered with the citrus, and then
Okay.
you're putting a tremendous amount of olive oil on this dish. This is calls for a 1.5 cups of
Oh,
olive oil.
wow. That's
So
a
it's
lot of olive
almost
oil.
like a confit
Yeah.
salmon. So it's really almost like poaching your salmon in oil, which makes it rich and tender. This is why I would do it for hosting and not for just a weeknight meal because
Right.
it's using a lot of oil. It's using salmon in a really special way, but the results are really surprisingly delicious. And just a change from what I normally do, which I like for hosting. And then for the side, I am thinking of a really bright and herbaceous green rice pilaf. I know herbs are the theme of every menu here, but herbs are
They
the
should
theme of
be. I think
spring,
they
you
should
know?
be. They really symbolize that green, that new growth, and they're really so peak in the spring.
Absolutely. And this is a Mark Bittman recipe with countless 5-star reviews. And it's where you cook some onion and garlic, and then you cook some rice in that sauteed onion and garlic. Then you add your liquid, and then you steam your rice. And at the end, you throw in a tremendous amount of fresh parsley, fresh cilantro, chives, and mint, and the zest of lemon. And so you have all those herbs. It feels very Persian to me. Persian rices are often
Right.
infused with so many
So many
herbs.
herbs, yeah. And I think what is great about that is going to help soak up some of that richness of the fish and the oil and also really balance it out and brighten it up.
Exactly. So I like those contrasts. And then for
Yeah.
dessert, I haven't made this yet, but this is like top of my list. You know how much I love a fresh strawberry pie? We've talked about that. So this is another Smitten Kitchen recipe. So this isn't quite a fresh strawberry pie because I have to say also strawberries don't really get good here until late May or June. For you, they come earlier.
Yeah, but I remember growing up in the Midwest and we would just kind of wait for them to come. You would always end up grabbing one like a week too soon and they would be hard and not sweet. And then you would finally get the good stuff.
So until peak strawberry season happens, but I'm still craving strawberries, I often rely on my frozen berries from the summer or just frozen berries from the grocery store. And so this recipe is perfect for that. It's a strawberry cheesecake ice cream pie,
Oh,
which
wow.
it's actually kind of simple, which is it has a graham cracker crust and then it has a no churn, no bake ice cream kind of filling that you make yourself. You know those ice creams we've talked about before where it's basically whole whipping cream with condensed milk, and this sort of
Yeah.
plays on that. And so this cheesecake filling is like a no bake filling with cream cheese and sweetened condensed milk and lemon zest and vanilla. That's it. And then you do a whipped cream topping, which is just whipped cream and vanilla and sugar. And then you make a strawberry sauce with a pound of strawberries and some sugar. And I make strawberry sauce for my cheesecakes all the time. But what I love about this is that it's a little different than that cheesecake. It
And
has a couple elements.
you can make it ahead, right? This is like you have to make it ahead because it's a frozen ice cream pie. So, what a great thing that you, at the end of a meal, just pull this out and serve it to your guests.
Yeah, you have to freeze it for 6 to 8 hours. That
Yeah.
cheese, that no churn ice cream filling is how I'm thinking of it.
I think that's an exciting thing to pull out of the freezer.
Yeah, I mean, and then you top it with the whipped cream. You top it with all that strawberry sauce, and it just kind of like runs over each slice, and it's just a fun presentation. Carrie, what's your last spring hosting menu?
Well, Sonia, I think you're not going to be surprised that I'm thinking about a grilled cheese and soup night, having maybe one other family over and having something very casual. I've noticed that over the years, there's this dip that's very garlicky, buttery olive oil called bagna cotta, which is made with anchovies, and you serve it with raw vegetables. And so the recipe that I'm linking really looks kind of like you've gone to the farmer's market and you found whatever they have at the farmer's market: purple cauliflower or white cauliflower, a little bit of asparagus, maybe some baby zucchini, snap peas. And the one sort of fussy piece of starting with this is that you really need to blanch your vegetables so that they're really bright and verdant. But you can do this ahead of time. Blanching vegetables just means getting a pot of water going like you would for pasta, blanching it until they're a little bit crisp tender, and then plunging them into some cold ice water to set that color and to make them really bright. And then with the sauce, it's just butter, anchovies, olive oil, and 24 garlic cloves. So it's a very garlicky dip. And so I would start with that just out on the table. And then I'd love to serve a very simple asparagus and leek soup. It's really just butter and leeks, garlic, 2 bunches of asparagus, a vegetable stock. You could certainly use chicken if that's what you had on hand. And at the very end, you swirl a little bit of creme fraiche in to kind of add a little bit of that tanginess and a little bit of lemon juice.
I'm so glad you're reminding us about asparagus soup because actually I went to dinner party at someone else's house for Passover one year and they started the meal with asparagus soup.
Oh,
And I
wow.
thought it was such a lovely light. It's just a different way to celebrate it versus just the way I normally do, which is like roasted or blanched or in a salad.
I think the other thing that you can think about too with this is if you've used your asparagus in another dish and you've just used the tips, this is a great place to use the stalks, not
Oh,
the woody
yeah.
ends. This is essentially just a green soup. Call it what you wish. I think the other thing that I would add to this is a little bit of frozen spinach or add a little bit of kale to it, which would make it really bright when you puree it all together because that asparagus, the longer that it sits and heated on the stove, it gets a little bit more gray. And I like that
That's a
bright
good
green.
point.
And part of this menu, too, the soup and the grilled cheese, reminds me of many catering lunches that I did for one specific client that you worked with me for, this client in Beverly Hills. And we would always start the meal with usually tomato soup with a heart-shaped grilled cheese. So I just thought, let's make a whole meal around this. So for the grilled cheese to go with this soup, I'm really thinking about white cheese that's very melty and gooey, a Monterey Jack is probably where I would go, and some kind of Gouda or raclette, or I think a Gruyere would be really nice.
I think Gruyere mixed with other cheeses is also really good because on its own it can be pungent,
It's
but
too
it melts.
pungent for me. Yes.
Right, but it melts so beautifully that when you cut it with something like Jack or cheddar, it works really well in a grilled cheese.
Yeah, and I think maybe rub a little bit of garlic on that grilled cheese too, which honestly, you can make a grilled cheese ahead and then just reheat them in the oven so that they're crispy and
Yes.
crunchy. The other thing we've been doing when we make our grilled cheeses is a trick that I think has been out there for a while, but you butter the inside of the bread where you put the cheese, and then you toast it with mayonnaise. And when you
Yes.
toast your bread with mayonnaise,
So you butter the inside of the bread so that the cheese gets more buttery, and then you slather the outside with
with the
mayonnaise.
mayonnaise, and
That's what
then
you
you cook it
need.
in the pan. So you fry it in the mayonnaise, not in the butter, which I would always fry it in butter before, until I kind of was like, why do people keep talking about this mayonnaise trick? And now I really know why they do. So
Because it doesn't
um,
burn because it's a different heat point than butter, where butter can sometimes get too burnt.
exactly. And I think when you do it in butter, it gets almost too crunchy. My husband can be a little picky about super crunchy things, and he's like, "Oh, it's like hurting my mouth." I think there's something about a grilled cheese that really is crispy, but it yields to you.
I've
Like
seen James, your husband, make a grilled cheese, and I think he is an excellent grilled cheese maker. As you know, I really believe that he always thinks I'm gassing him up, but I actually mean this.
he is an excellent grilled cheese maker. This is true.
I'll have to have him make one next time I'm in town.
Absolutely. And then for dessert, Sonia, I found this lemon mousse that I'm really excited to talk to you about. It's a little bit of a layered dessert. You're really taking lemon curd and you're stirring it into some whipped cream, and you're adding a little bit of fresh lemon to it. But
There's
it
no
also,
gelatin or raw eggs. It's whipped
there's
cream and lemon curd.
there's no gelatin and raw eggs at
Ooh.
all. They also layer it with some graham cracker crumbs. This is something that you can make ahead of time. I have a lot of mason jars in my house, and so this is one of those desserts that you can kind of make individually, or if you're someone who has fancy crystal or really fun serving dishes, this is something that you could just serve in really pretty dishes. My neighbors have a lemon tree and it extends over our fence, and so we have always have tons of lemons. Last year at this time, I made my first lemon curd. You can make your own lemon curd or you can buy lemon curd. It can really be one of those assembly desserts. You're just smashing your graham crackers, you're melting butter in a skillet, and then you put those into your serving dish at the very bottom. And then you whip your cream and you add a little bit of lemon juice and lemon zest to that cream. And then you gently fold in the lemon curd. And then that makes the lemon mousse. And then you top it with a little bit more whipped cream. And you could add a little zest. You could add like a little cookie. You could add a little bit more of those graham cracker crumbs on top.
I love this. I actually think this is another great Passover idea because, first of all, you could skip the graham crackers if you don't want grains, or you could find a Passover cookie that you crumble up instead. And the fact that it doesn't require raw eggs or gelatin makes it so home cook friendly. I love mousse, but I don't enjoy those aspects of making homemade mousse. So if I can find mousses that deliver the same kind of fluffy, delightful texture without all that extra work, and I think you could use a non-dairy whipped cream for this as well. So there's just like a lot of versatility in this recipe.
Yeah, I didn't even really think about that when I saw it. I was really thinking about lemon as one of those flavors that you really want in the spring. But that's such a great point that you could adjust it to what your needs are or the needs of the guests that are coming to your house.
Yeah, it sounds so good. There's so many good options here for the whole season. Well, until next time,
Until next time,
bye.
bye. Thanks for being our food friend.
If you enjoyed our podcast, please subscribe, leave us a review, and share this episode with friends. We love hearing from you, so follow us on Instagram or drop us a line at foodfriendspodcast.com.
Yes, we'd love to hear from you and your food friends. Happy cooking and eating.